My mother looked at me across the Thanksgiving table, her wine glass poised like a weapon, and with a smile that never reached her eyes, she asked how it felt to be a total failure of a daughter. Let me take you back to the moment that changed everything. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 34 years old, and I work the night shift as an RN in the pediatric ICU at a hospital outside of Chicago. It's a job that requires a steady hand and an unshakable calm, qualities I'd spent years perfecting. But at last year's family gathering, in front of nearly 20 relatives, my mother, Diana, decided to test those qualities in the most public way possible. She held my sister's expensive Chardonnay, wore a new designer coat she'd never shown me, and ensured the entire table was watching. The response I gave wasn't rehearsed, but it was the truth. And in the silence that followed, my father stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled, and a single question from him began a chain reaction that would permanently alter the map of our family. Welcome back to Zarabell Stories, where family secrets are unearthed and the quiet ones finally find their voice. If you appreciate narratives about reclaiming your power from those who take you for granted, please leave a comment below and make sure to subscribe. You will not want to miss what happens at this dining table. Let me give you the full picture of my life as it was last autumn. I'm a pediatric nurse. My shift starts at 7 in the evening and ends at 7 in the morning. I've been doing it for almost 10 years at a large children's hospital. I can place in 4 in a squirming infant while a heart monitor is beeping beside me. I know 15 different techniques to soothe a feverish child. What I apparently couldn't do was see my own mother for who she truly was. I lived in a tiny, one-bedroom apartment with a kitchen so small I had to turn sideways to open the oven. Most of my dinners were simple, a bowl of pasta with olive oil or rice and beans. Not a sad meal, I should say. I make a pretty good garlic and herb sauce. But it was cheap and repetitive because that's what my budget allowed. My scrubs were always the ones on the sale rack. My car had over 180,000 miles and a persistent dashboard light I'd long since named Betsy. And every single month, without fail, in my bank account, there was a savings folder I'd optimistically labeled Home Sweet Home. It was my down payment fund. After 6 years of picking up extra shifts and working holidays, it should have been a sizable nest egg. Instead, it barely covered a few months' rent. It was like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Here's the reason why. On the first day of every month, right at 6 in the morning, a significant chunk of my paycheck quietly vanished from my checking account. An automated, silent transfer. I'd purposely scheduled it for that early hour, hoping I'd be too busy at the hospital, too focused on my patients, to feel the sting of it leaving. You don't set a bill to be paid at a time you won't witness it unless a part of you already knows you shouldn't be paying it. It took me half a decade to decipher what that cryptic timestamp was trying to tell me. Where was that money going? It's a secret I've held on to until now. Every cent was sent to my mother. It covered her rent, her utilities, her car payments, and her insurance. It silently and completely supported her entire life. And the rest of my family had no idea. It started 6 years ago, about 2 years after my parents' divorce. I was 26. She called me late one night, her voice trembling, and I went over to find her in a state of complete despair. She sat at her kitchen table, her hands shaking, her eyes red from crying. "Your father," she wept, "left me with absolutely nothing. He stripped me of everything. I have less than $20 to my name until my next check." My heart ached for her, so I gave her my credit card for groceries. That was the first domino to fall. The bars of my cage were self-installed, and I'd polished them to a shine. A few months later, she mentioned her car insurance was about to be canceled, and I picked up that expense because the thought of her driving uninsured terrified me more than the monthly premium. Then, about 4 years ago, she found a beautiful apartment in a gated complex. It had a courtyard with a fountain and a pool. To qualify, she needed a guarantor. So I signed my name, and her rent became part of that 6 in the morning bite. It was $1,100 a month at first. She had one specific demand, and she squeezed my wrist as she made it. "Promise me you won't tell your father. I can't have him knowing I'm struggling. It would be so humiliating. It stays between us." I told myself it was about preserving her dignity. Everyone deserves dignity, right? And she was my mother. So I made do with my simple meals, worked my extra shifts, and kept her secret like a dutiful daughter. I kept it for 6 whole years. But that secret was a double-sided coin. I was holding one side, but my father unknowingly held the other. And neither of us knew the same woman had given each of us a completely different story. To be fair, I'd been trained for this my entire life. My mother never gave anything without expecting something in return. She kept a mental ledger of every single thing she did for you. The new bike I got at age 10 would be weaponized in arguments for years. After everything I've done for you, all that money I spent, this is how you treat me? My good grades weren't my accomplishments. They were hers to brag about at her book club. When I got into the honor society, she had told her friends before she even told me. Favors were loans, kindness came with interest, and love was a transaction. When I was a kid, my grandmother would slip a $20 bill into my birthday card, and my mother would take it from my hands on the way home from the restaurant. For safekeeping, she'd say, and then, catching my reflection in the rearview mirror, she'd smile and recite the mantra I was raised on. Love keeps a ledger, sweetheart. It always has. She said it the same way other mothers said be careful. Years later, when those monthly transfers were bleeding me dry, I gently suggested we sit down and look at her budget. I'm pretty good with numbers. I track my own spending meticulously. She looked at me as if I'd offered to have her scrub floors for a living. Budgets are for people with limited imaginations, she sniffed, stirring her tea. And that was the end of that conversation. I need to be honest with you about something. I didn't think any of this was strange. When you're raised in an aquarium, you don't question the water. I thought that was just how families worked, how love was shown, and what daughters were for. It took me over 3 decades, a single photograph on a social media feed, and an old battered journal to uncover the source of my mother's arithmetic. Here's what I was working toward all those years. A modest house. Nothing extravagant. Just a place with a small yard for a garden, a sunny kitchen, and a front door I could lock behind me. I'd gotten pre-approved for a small mortgage that spring. My realtor, a cheerful woman with a love for fixer-uppers, had been emailing me listings for almost a year. Your budget is a treasure hunt, she'd say. But I love a good adventure. By my calculations, those 6 years of extra shifts should have given me a hefty down payment. Instead, I was still thousands of dollars short. So I took on more weekend shifts and asked her to keep searching. Meanwhile, the rest of my family continued on their separate paths. My dad, Robert, a retired electrician, lived across town in a small ranch house. He's a man of few words, but he's the one who will show up with his toolbox to fix your faucet without being asked. My sister, Clarissa, a school administrator, is married with 2 kids. She works hard and is always stressed. Whenever I mentioned our mom was struggling, Clarissa would just sigh. Mom's fine, Sarah. She's been the victim of the world since 1995. Don't let her walk all over you. It was easy for her to say. She wasn't the one paying the bills. I never corrected her, because correcting her meant revealing the secret. So I just smiled, nodded, and signed up for another shift. Then one Tuesday in September, in the middle of my shift, my phone buzzed.
Mom.
The text read urgent, call me. The emergency turned out to be her car registration, which she claimed was about to expire. It wasn't, because I'd already paid it. I checked from the parking lot. She then waved a medical bill at me. I asked to see it calmly, the way I'd ask any patient's family for a document. I want you to understand that I'd asked before. I'd asked for bank statements. I'd offered to help her manage the finances. Every request triggered the same performance. Act 1, tears. My own daughter treating me like a criminal. Act 2, shame. How dare you count pennies when I gave you life itself? Act 3, the closer. Do you want to be responsible for my health failing? Do you want the family to know you're the reason I'm in the hospital? The one time I'd actually stood my ground, she'd given me the silent treatment for 3 weeks and used the family phone tree. My aunt called me in hysterics about the ungrateful child. So no, I didn't see the bill. I just transferred the money standing in her hallway by the door. As I turned to leave, I noticed a glossy shopping bag by the closet. tissue paper peeking out. The kind of bag you get at high-end boutiques. My mother casually nudged it behind the coats with her heel. It was a smooth, practiced movement. That weekend, I went to my dad's house so he could look at my brakes. That's how he shows his affection. He's a man who speaks through his hands. While he worked, he glanced up at me. "You're looking tired, honey. You eating right?" "I work nights, Dad. My schedule is pretty messed up." He grunted, which was his way of laughing. And then, while wiping grease off a part, he said something that planted a seed of doubt. "It's hard to imagine your mom struggling, what with everything she got in the divorce." I made sure she was completely taken care of. I froze, my hands full of tools. Set? My mother's story, the one I'd been funding for 6 years, was about being destitute and abandoned. "He left me with nothing," she'd said. 2 people I loved were telling me 2 wildly different versions of the same event, and they both believed themselves to be right. I opened my mouth, the question sitting there like a stone in my throat. "How much, Dad? What did she get?" But I'd made a promise. If I asked, he'd want to know why, and the whole edifice I'd been holding up for 6 years would crumble. So, I swallowed the question. This is a feeling so many of you know, isn't it? That moment a fact you've accepted for years collides with a new piece of information. When your reality shifts, and you can't unsee it. 2 weeks later, my realtor called, excited. A charming old brick bungalow was about to hit the market. It was an estate sale, a steal, priced to sell fast. "If you want this, you need to move immediately, Sarah. This is the one you've been waiting for." I sat at my kitchen table that night, after my shift, and crunched the numbers on a receipt. I could make it work if I skipped 1 month of my mother's rent. Just one. Or if I drained my emergency fund, leaving me with no safety net. I sat there for a long time. The silence in my apartment, so profound I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Then the calendar turned to the 1st, and at 6 in the morning, while I was administering medication to a child, the transfer went out just as it always did. $1,400 plus everything else. Because somewhere in my heart, I had decided her roof was more important than my own front door. Nobody forced me to do that. That's the ugly, useful truth I can admit now. I built the cage I was standing in, and I spent years polishing the bars. The house sold within days to a young couple. I told my realtor I was happy for them, and I meant it. Then I worked 4 nights straight and refused to process what had happened. But on the 5th night, my cousin sent me a screenshot with a string of question marks. "Hey, isn't this your mom?" I opened the image. It was turquoise water, white sand, a swim-up bar, and my mother in a floppy hat, holding a giant cocktail. It was posted on my aunt's vacation album. 6 days in Cabo. I scrolled through the photos. My mother on a catamaran, laughing. My mother in a designer swimsuit. My mother smiling, toes in the sand. The caption read, "Sister's trip, long overdue." The timeline hit me like a truck. Those 6 days in the sun were the exact same week my mother had told me she was going to a spiritual retreat in a small, cheap town. "Don't you worry about me, sweetheart," she'd said on the phone. I remember that call distinctly because I'd offered to pay for her retreat registration. Standing in that break room, I ran through every excuse a loving daughter could muster. Maybe my aunt paid for it. Maybe it was a gift. But then I saw the tissue paper bag from her closet in one of the pictures. It was sitting on a hotel bed, like a trophy. Here's the thing about nurses. When a lab result is inconsistent with a patient's symptoms, you don't argue with the test. You investigate. Something in me went cold and methodical. I didn't call her. I didn't text my aunt. I finished my shift, calm and professional, and then drove home through the empty city streets, sat down at my kitchen counter, and began my own investigation. Every account, every statement, 6 years of history. I didn't hack into my mother's accounts. I simply opened my own. I made myself a cup of tea and built a spreadsheet. 6 years of grocery money. 5 years of car insurance. 4 years of rent on her luxury apartment. $1,100 a month, then a jump to $1,400 a year ago, which she claimed was a standard building-wide increase. Add the emergencies, the $600 bills, the $800 calls, the furnace repair that I'm now pretty sure didn't involve a furnace. When the final cell filled in, I just stared at the total. And the total stared back at me. Just over $100,000. I'm going to let that number sink in because I had to. $100,000. Shift by shift. Night by night. Egg by egg. While my dream of a home starved and was sold to people who cried in the kitchen. I didn't feel anger yet. Anger would come later. What I felt was the cold clarity of an X-ray, finally seeing the fracture that had caused 6 years of pain. I decided to give her one fair chance. Not an ambush, but an exit ramp. I invited her to lunch at her favorite cafe. I rehearsed my calm in the car. When we sat down, I didn't mention the photos or the spreadsheet. I said, "Mom, I'm worried about your finances. Let me help you create a plan. A real one. We can talk to a financial advisor or look at downsizing. I'll go with you to every meeting, you and me." She stirred her coffee for a long moment. Then she performed a small wounded laugh for the benefit of the table next to us. "My sister paid for that trip, you know," she said, though I hadn't brought it up. It was a dead giveaway. You'd know that if you ever called your aunt. I was just a guest. Was I supposed to embarrass myself and say no? It was a seamless gaslight. Then she looked at me with a glint in her eye. "Oh, I see. You're keeping score now, are you? Love keeps a ledger, Sarah. Is that what this is?" She took the very sentence she'd raised me on and hurled it back at me like a weapon. Then, without missing a beat, she tacked on, "Thanksgiving is coming up. I'll need $700 for the gifts. I can't have you ruining the holiday because I show up empty-handed." And it was in that moment that the glass cracked. I didn't say yes. I said, "Let me think about it." The silence that followed was only a few seconds long, but it was deafening. It was the price of thinking, of disobeying. It took less than 2 days for the full weight of the family machine to bear down on me. First my aunt called, her voice already thick with sorrow. "After everything your mother has sacrificed for you, Sarah." She was in tears because I snapped at her over coffee. Then my sister texted, "Whatever is going on with you and Mom, just fix it. She's blowing up my phone and it's parent-teacher week. I can't deal." Not one person asked me what had happened. Not one person asked me if I was okay. That's the design of the machine. It distributes verdicts. It doesn't gather facts. I went to work that night, and a moment of grace found me. My patient was a 7-year-old boy with a severe infection, finally getting better. His mother had been by his bedside for 4 days straight, sleeping in a hard chair. She refused to leave. She never once mentioned what she was owed. She never once raised her voice to the staff. She just stayed, holding a door closed against the darkness. I looked at what love actually looks like when nobody's keeping score. I pulled a blanket from the unused cot and draped it over her shoulders. Then I stood in the hallway and did the kind of arithmetic a spreadsheet can't hold. On the 1st of November, I decided to take control. Instead of a transfer, I got a money order and drove it to her apartment building myself. The lobby was fragrant with cinnamon and potpourri. The leasing agent knows me well. I'm not the daughter to her. I'm the account that covers the checks. "Right on time, as always," she chirped. "And how are you liking the 2-bedroom? I think the extra den and the garage are just wonderful." I kept my face placid. "Remind me when that happened, will you?" She tapped her keyboard. "About 14 months ago. Your mom wanted to upgrade to the Cambridge layout. It's a nice space. A den and a garage. The building-wide increase. The world is cruel. My mother wasn't drowning. She was redecorating." I stood in the parking lot, and I screamed on the inside for what felt like hours. I didn't drive straight home that day. I drove past a listing my realtor had sent me. A tiny yellow house on a quiet street. It had a crooked mailbox, a faded fence, and a sagging porch. But inside, the afternoon light was perfect, falling across the dining nook. I saw a table there. People who came because they wanted to. It was old, it needed work, and it didn't apologize for itself. I took a picture of the crooked mailbox and set it as my phone background. "I want this one," I told my realtor. "Just give me until December." "That's tight, Sarah," she said, a note of worry in her voice. "I know," I said, looking at the mailbox. "Just give me until December anyway." I didn't yet know exactly where the money would come from. I only knew where it would stop going. You can't budget someone out of a belief. You can only stop funding the belief. That night, I prepared an envelope. It contained 3 apartment listings she could afford on her own, a counselor's card with a prepaid session, and a handwritten note detailing what I was willing to offer instead of money. My Sundays, my help moving, my presence. Before Saturday, however, I needed to do something I'd put off for years. I told my sister the truth. Clarissa sat at my counter, and I walked her through my statements. 6 years of payments, 5 of insurance, 4 of rent, the trip. I watched the color drain from her face. "Sarah," she said, her voice cold, "Mom owes me $4,000. I just stared. Small loans. A furnace thing, a dental bill, a bridge loan, until the first. Always urgent. And always she told me that you were the one who could never help because you had your own little life." She had kept us in different rooms and told each of us the other was empty. Clarissa wanted to burn everything down then and there. "No," I said. "No. I'm not doing to her what she does to me. No audience. No ambush. I'm just going to stop." She exhaled. "Okay," she said. "Your call. But I'm done covering for her." 2 days later, the family bulletin arrived. Our mother would be at Thanksgiving, and she was bringing an announcement. The rumor was she was moving to Florida to be near her sister. And the key phrase was she'll need the kids' help getting set up. I'd heard that phrase before from my dad about the house he gave her. He thought he was setting her up for life. I was starting to understand that getting set up was simply a bill that always found its way to me. Then I saw the car. A brand new, shiny SUV with dealer plates. She saw me looking and got ahead of it. "My old car was unsafe," she said, crossing her arms. "Not that my children ever care. If something happened to me on the highway, then you'd all be sorry." I stood there, holding her groceries, a living tableau of the whole arrangement. The last flicker of doubt in my heart went out like a pilot light. She wasn't in trouble. She was living large on a budget that I was providing. The Saturday lunch came. I set the envelope between us. "Mom," I said, level as a heart monitor, "starting December 1st, I will no longer be paying your rent, your car payments, or your insurance. In this envelope are 3 apartments you can afford, a counselor, and a note about what I will do. My Sundays, moving day, doctor's visits. You get me. You just don't get my paycheck anymore." The silence had a texture to it. I watched her run through her usual gambits. The watery eyes. The hand on the chest. But there was no audience, so she stopped. What settled on her face was something new. Cold calculation. "You will be nothing to this family," she said, her voice flat. "I will make sure of it. By Christmas, you won't be welcome in my sister's house." I stood, pushed in my chair, and left the envelope. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even look at it. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I sat with the leasing manager and signed the document to remove myself as the guarantor. I couldn't undo the original signature, but I could refuse to extend the chain. Then I drove home, sat on my bed, and opened the banking app. There it was. The automatic transfer, scheduled for the 1st at 6 a.m. My thumb hovered over the toggle. 6 years. Off with one tap. The switch went from green to gray. "Are you sure?" the app asked. "Honey, I have never been more sure of anything." The silence from her was deafening. No calls. No texts. And if you've ever had a mother like mine, you know that silence wasn't peace. It was artillery being moved into position. Inside those quiet days, my aunt detonated a group text full of innuendo about children who abandoned their mothers right before the holidays. My sister held the line. And I got a call from my realtor. The offer on the yellow house was accepted. Closing in February. Then the call came. My mother, voice bright as tinsel, as if nothing had happened. "See you Thursday, sweetheart. Bring your famous dinner rolls. Everyone is coming. Everyone." She leaned on the word, a test of the floorboard. Thanksgiving at my sister's was a cast of 21. The good china was out. The kids had their own table in the den. My dad was in his best sweater, sneaking olives to the kids. I brought my rolls, my hands steady. My mother arrived late, of course, just enough time to make an entrance. New coat, fresh hair, the designer bag on her arm. She hugged everyone but me. Grace was said. Plates were loaded. And then the show began.
A sigh.
A comment about how she manages alone. How she learns who her real children are when she gets old. It was aimed at the whole table. I just ate my green beans. But I noticed my father had gone still. His fork was down, his eyes on his ex-wife. Then my sweet cousin innocently asked, "Sarah, how's the house hunting going?" I decided to keep it small. "Actually, I found one," I said. "It's a little yellow house with a crooked mailbox, and I love it." A ripple of happiness went through the table. My dad smiled. My sister squeezed my knee under the tablecloth. But I heard my mother set her fork down with a sharp click. She laughed. A loud, mocking, brittle laugh. "A house?"
she said.
"Sarah, honey, you can barely keep yourself alive in that little rental. You bring frozen rolls and drive a car that sounds like a dying lawnmower." She looked around, gathering the audience like a hurricane gathering clouds. She leaned forward, her eyes bright and cruel. "How does it feel to be so utterly useless, daughter?" 21 people, silent. My mother sat back, smiling, waiting. "And I want to tell you what I felt. Not rage, not sadness. It was the quiet of a room where a decision has already been made. The surgery is over. This is just the bandage coming off." I set my napkin down. I looked at her, the hair, the bag, the smirk, and I heard my own voice, level and gentle. "It feels great, Mom, since I just canceled your rent." The words hit the table like a grenade. My mother's smile didn't fall. It froze, stuck to her face, then slid off like a mask, leaving nothing but shock behind. Then I heard my father's chair scrape the floor as he stood straight up. "Rent?" he said, his voice a dangerous rumble. "What rent?" And the table detonated. My sister was already moving the kids out of the room. My aunt's hand flew to her chest. My mother stared from me to my father. For the first time in her life, she had no words. "Sarah pays my rent," my mother finally said, spitting it out. "Children help their mothers."
"How long?"
My father boomed. "How long has this been going on?" So I told him. No spreadsheet. No raised voice. Just the facts. 6 years, Dad. Groceries, car insurance, rent. She upgraded to a bigger unit. She went to Cabo while I covered everything and told me she was at a church retreat. Each word hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the chair until it creaked, then turned to my mother. His voice cracked and terrible. "Diana, I gave you over $180,000. I signed over the whole house thinking you would never have to worry. So our girls would never have to carry you. Where did it all go?" For a moment, she was silent. Then the tears came, right on cue. "You would throw this in my face on Thanksgiving? You are a cold, cold child," she said, turning on me. "I gave you life. You owe me." The Florida move would have fixed everything if you weren't so selfish. The announcement. It was never a plan. It was an invoice. Then she stood, pressing both hands on the table. She summoned her full power.
"Fine.
You want to count pennies against your mother? Choose, Sarah. You walk out that door. You are no daughter of mine. Not at Christmas. Not at my funeral. Not ever. Choose." The room held its breath for me. I looked at her and finally saw the truth. Not the mother I'd been paying for, a woman who would love me just for me. That mother was a ghost. She never existed. There was only this one. Magnificent, terrified, demanding I buy her loyalty one more time. I stood up too. I pushed my chair in. "The counselor's appointment is paid for, Mom. The apartment list is on your table. That offer doesn't expire. You can have my Sundays. You can't have my paycheck." Behind me, her voice climbed into a shrill shriek. "Love keeps a ledger, Sarah.
It always has."
I stopped in the doorway and gave her back the only answer I had left. "Then I'm paid in full, Mom." I pulled the door shut with a soft click. My father came out to the porch. He put his hand on my shoulder, heavy and warm. "I made sure she was set," he said slowly. "All these years, I never once thought to check who was setting you." My sister came out next, arms crossed, holding a plate of food. "You're not driving home hungry," she said, stuffing it into my hands. And Sunday, my kids are helping you pack. The little one already called dibs on the packing tape. Through the window, I saw my mother already telling her version of the story. Already the victim.
But the audience was smaller now.
She'd manage. I didn't drive home. I drove to the yellow house and sat in the dark, looking at the crooked mailbox in my headlights. My phone lit up.
Mom.
A voicemail. I let it play. It opened with fury. I humiliated her. It downshifted into grief. She was old. She was alone. Then it got sweet. You were my little shadow, you know? My helper. My good girl. And then the threat. If you don't fix this by Sunday, don't ever call me again. Fury.
Grief. Nostalgia. Threat.
It was a full performance of the only song she knew. I didn't call back. I typed one text. The counselor's name, the date, and the words, "The offer still stands." I turned my phone face down and looked at the house. For 6 years, I'd paid to feel like I was worth keeping. That night, in a car, outside a house I didn't yet own, I felt, for free, like I was already home. Real love doesn't keep score. It just keeps showing up. On December 1st, for the first time in 4 years, 6 a.m. arrived and took nothing from me. I was at work, hanging in 4 at 5:58 and another at 6:15. And, in between, nothing happened. And nothing has ever felt so much like everything. The rent at my mother's luxury apartment was paid on time without me. The leasing manager never called. The money wasn't missing. The excuse was, she didn't renew the lease. She moved into a one-bedroom at one of the senior communities I'd listed. She hates it, of course. She tells everyone she's simplified her life to escape possessions. The SUV went back. She went to one counselor session and deemed the woman dim. My mother didn't transform. She is a magnificent, invincible adapter, but her ledger is closed on my page. Never again on my page. I closed on the yellow house in February. My dad came the first Saturday and rebuilt the front steps. He said maybe 20 words all day, but I understood every one. On Sunday, my sister's kids painted the crooked mailbox. It looks like it's waving, my niece explained. It stays crooked forever. In April, a birthday card came in that waving mailbox. Thinking of you, Mother. No apology. No invoice. I put it on the windowsill. It still sits there. Twice a month on Sundays, I still drive her to the grocery store.
We don't talk about the past.
She has my Sundays. My paycheck never met her again. This Thanksgiving, we were at the yellow house. My table was too small, so we added a folding one. It didn't match and nobody cared. We set an empty chair. The invitation went out and came back declined, which is its own kind of answer. Standing at the stove, watching my family eat food no one will be billed for, I finally understood what years of payments could never buy me. Real love doesn't keep score. It just keeps showing up. And the day I stopped paying to be loved was the day I found out exactly who had loved me for free all along. If this story felt familiar, take it as your sign. Set one boundary this week and keep it kindly. Share this video with someone who's still paying to be loved. Then drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. For Zarabell Stories, I'm Sarah Mitchell. Thanks for listening.